All right, well, I'm going to get into a couple topics today. First thing I'm going to look at is Alberta separation. It looks like there's been a new update, and we may be getting a referendum question. So that's exciting. I also hear that a lot of people are confused by the referendum question, so we're gonna look into it, and we're just gonna have a see. Okay, let's have a look. This is a big and fast moving story. Here's a full breakdown of where things stand as of today, May 25th, 2026. Alright. Yes, there will be a referendum question. Okay, well that answers the, the primary question. On October 19th, 2026, on the evening of May 21st, Premier Danielle Smith addressed Albertans and announced the following. A question will be added to the October 19th ballot asking whether Alberta's government should commence the legal process necessary to hold a binding referendum on separation from Canada. So, from my understanding, their attempts to hold a binding referendum got shut down in the courts. And so now they're like, okay, well, we'll just ask a question to see if the people want us to pursue a binding referendum. And so they just essentially took another step back and they're asking a question, which I think is going to be the 10th question, because I think there was already 9 going to be on there on the referendum coming up on October 19th. Ooh, the exact wording of the question. Okay, because this is where I think some confusion is happening. Should Alberta remain a province of Canada, or should the government of Alberta commence the legal process required under the Canadian Constitution to hold a binding provincial referendum on whether or not Alberta should separate from Canada? Okay, so it's not a yes-no question. So then, do you have 2 boxes? One that says, should Alberta remain a province of Canada? And then a box that says, should Alberta commence the legal, like that's a big question with the box. Like, should Alberta remain a province of Canada? Simple yes or no. Okay. Importantly, or should. How is this a yes or no question? Importantly, a yes vote in October would not trigger separation. What? Like, there's 2 questions here, right? So is this 2 different referendum questions? Should Alberta remain a province of Canada, yes or no? Should the government of Alberta commence the legal process required under the Canadian Constitution to hold a binding referendum on whether or not Alberta should separate from Canada, yes or no? But they're making it 1 question? Okay, let's continue. Importantly, a yes vote in October would trigger separation. But what if the question is, should Alberta remain a province of Canada? Wouldn't that mean a yes vote would not trigger separation? I see the confusion. I definitely see the confusion. When you start with should Alberta remain a province of Canada, and you're supposed to vote no if you don't want to separate. Okay, I'm gonna just go out there and guess that this is not going to be the final wording of the question, because this doesn't make sense. The exact wording of the question is, okay, let's continue to read, and I'll come back to this. Importantly, a yes vote in October would not trigger separation. So, should Alberta remain a province of Canada? voting yes would not trigger separation. Okay, that makes sense. But then, why is there a second question? It would only direct the government on the path citizens want to take. The October vote also marks the first time in Canadian history that a province other than Quebec has put the question of separation to the public. Like I got no problem with a referendum question on separation. I kind of like the non-binding process first that we're taking. I kind of like how it's being done right now. This question, if this is the wording of it, like, that's not going to tell you anything. 90% of people are going to be like, which question am I answering? The first one or the second one? Okay. Let's continue. I'll ask about this. Why did Smith act now on Alberta? In my opinion, like, both the Forever Canada and Stay Free Alberta petitions, they both got enough votes for a referendum question. And so I feel like if you go through the process, you get the votes to get the referendum question. Even if it's a non-binding referendum question, you should have it. Should be there. And the fact that it was getting shut down legally just didn't make sense to me. Okay, an Alberta judge ruled that the Citizens Initiative petition organized by the group Stay Free Alberta was unconstitutional, finding that there was inadequate consultation with a First Nations band about the potential effects of the petition on their treaty rights. Smith called the ruling an overreach. She defended the referendum question, saying the court's ruling left her with no other option. And while she promised to appeal it, the process could take years. Yeah, it could get stuck in the court for a long time, right? Smith's personal opinion. Smith was clear that she personally supports Alberta remaining in Canada and would vote against separation in a provincial referendum. She framed the October vote as a way to hear from Albertans and move forward rather than letting the debate drag on indefinitely. Like, I feel like this is a good decision on her part. As long as the question is clear, then I largely support those. How Albertans responding? New poll from the Angus Reid Institute finds that 60% of Albertans would vote no. The official October question, they vote no. Yeah. So if you vote no, it's staying in Canada, compared to 35 who would vote yes. Now, remember, when I look deeper into this, a lot of the yes vote is more of a protest vote against Ottawa and not really like an actual desire to leave. As far as I could tell when I was looking at it, because like there's a lot of reasons for people to be angry with the federal government, and this is a way that they can express it. When they look at actually like how many people, when they understand the consequences and understand the actual process of leaving, wanted to vote, it was somewhere between like 15 and 19% would stay the course and want to leave no matter what. And I think this is what happened in Brexit. Like, Brexit was kind of like a protest against the current government, and not like people didn't really understand the full consequences of what leaving would look like and what leaving would do to the economy. So, I mean, it's still much lower than the 50%. I assume they would need to push forward for an actual binding referendum, but who knows? These numbers can shift wildly depending on what happens in Ottawa. They can. When asked a simpler hypothetical leave or stay, The federal position strengthened further, with 66 opting to stay and 30% choosing to leave. So when they clarify the question, is this like part of their plan to use a confusing question? I hope not. However, roughly half of respondents found the 37-word question confusing. Yeah. I mean, I'm also finding it confusing. Like, should Alberta remain a province of Canada? That should be the end of the question. Right there. If you wanted to include a second question, sure, put that one on there. There's no one's saying we can only have one referendum question. Let's have more referendum questions. I got no problem with that. I would also like you know how they do all those online poll questions where it's like slightly agree, neutral, slightly disagree. Where you have like different tones. I think that would give you more information of where people stand. Like, do you slightly want to leave, or strongly want to leave? Okay. Political reaction. The move has been controversial on both sides. Separatist-like lawyer Jeff Rath called it a betrayal, and former Calgary Mayor Nia Nishin accused Smith of extraordinarily political malfeasance, saying she would not lift one finger to help those who want to remain in Canada. So to directly answer your question, yes, Albertans will get to vote on October 19th. It should be a direct separation vote, but rather a vote on... It won't be a direct separation vote, but rather a vote on whether to begin the legal process that could lead to one. This is definitely confusing because the first part of this, should Alberta remain a province of Canada? Okay, clear. Yes or no. But if you vote yes, you're actually stating that the government of Alberta should commence the legal process required under the Canadian Constitution to hold a binding political referendum on whether or not Alberta should separate from Canada. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is not going to be the final wording, because something tells me she's going to get a lot of backlash. Just make it two different questions. Nice and easy. Something tells me there's going to be a lot of backlash there. The Alberta referendum separation question appears to have two different questions in it. Which one are you supposed to answer? And why are there two questions? Let's see what he has to say. So we're gonna watch her a 14-minute address, which we'll watch after this. Let's see. Good observation. You're not alone in finding it confusing. About half of Albertans surveyed found the question confusing. Here's why it reads that way and what's actually going on. It's one question with two answer choices baked into it. The question isn't literally asking two separate things. It's structured as an A or B. Okay, yes, you want this or you want that. Binary choice, which is a common referendum format. Yes, do you want coffee? Okay. The full context is... So then... Should Alberta remain the province? Like... But you've asked, do you want coffee or tea? And then you've told them to answer yes or no. Do you want coffee or tea? Your answer is yes or no. Well, how do I get the tea? You know? Okay, Let's see if we can follow this logic. Should Alberta remain a province of Canada, or should the government of Alberta commence the legal process required? Okay, yeah. Should to. I'm not going to continue to read that whole thing. Vote no. Alberta stays in Canada. Like, as long as this is clearly defined, like, and it's not no and yes, it's no, Alberta stays in Canada. Yes, the government starts the legal process towards a binding separation referendum. Like, as long as this is described, something tells me it's not. Like, it seems like a trick because it's a huge question and people are going to read, should Alberta remain a province of Canada? Okay, yes, I agree to that. And so you click yes without realizing that you're actually agreeing to the whole second part of the question. Ugh. Like, if you ask someone if they want coffee or tea, your answers aren't supposed to be yes and no. They're supposed to be coffee or tea. But I feel like you're going to walk in there and you're going to get a no or a yes. Okay. So why does it feel like two questions? The confusing comes from two things, the length and legal language. Simpler version could have been, should Alberta separate from Canada, yes or no? Yeah, like that's what you want to ask. That's what it should be, right there. Instead, the question is third and long and packed with constitutional legal terminology, asking about a process, not the outcome. The yes vote doesn't mean separation. It means starting the legal process old. Okay. Smith said the wording was intended to appease both sides of the debate. Just give us two questions. Like, there was two petitions, Forever Canada and Stay Free Alberta, that both got the required signatures to get a referendum question. Give them both a question. Not hard. Like, you basically got two different questions. Just split them up. Which is part of why it reads as a compromise. It avoids directly asking, do you want to leave Canada? While still giving separatists a path forward. Critics, including legal experts, weren't impressed. I mean, I'm not impressed. A University of Calgary law professor, emeritus, describes it as a rather clumsy attempt to get around the decision of the judge. So, okay, first of all, what the heck is this? Is that a name that's not capitalized?
Emeritus.
Emeritus. Define emeritus. Emeritus is an honorary title given to a professor who has retired honorably from a distinguished career. Oh, so a retired professor. Calgary law professor emeritus. Describes it as a rather clumsy attempt to get around. So, is it so confusing because they're trying to get around the legal worker, the judge ruling? So the question is deliberately confusing to get around the legal ruling that stopped the referendum. Because the whole, like, do you want coffee or tea? Yes or no? How do you get your coffee? That's a reasonable interpretation, and it's essentially what critics are arguing. Here's the honest breakdown. What the courts ruled. The judge struck down the original Stay Free Alberta petition question. because the government hadn't adequately consulted with indigenous communities about how it would affect their treaty rights. If it's a non-binding petition, like maybe they were trying to get a binding petition. But if it's a non-binding petition, I don't see how non-binding, not going to affect the treaty rights. You talk about that after you find out if people want to leave or not. That ruling blocked a direct binding separation referendum. Okay. So that ruling blocked a direct binding separation. So essentially, they were trying to get a binding separation referendum. And now they've had to do a non-binding one because a court order blocked the binding separation referendum. Which I completely understand. Like, you can't have a binding referendum without figuring out all the details of what a yes would actually. And so they're just putting a non-binding question in. Rather than wait for the appeal, she added a government authorized question, not a citizen. You should have added two. Not a citizen petition question. The existing October 19th ballot because it came from the government rather than from the petition process. It sidesteps the court ruling entirely. The legal challenge was specifically against the petition mechanism, not the government's own power to put referendum questions to voters. Is the confusing wording deliberate? Probably partly yes, but for a few reasons at once. The indirect, asking about starting a process rather than separating itself, may be designed to keep legally defensible. Okay, that makes sense. Smith herself said that the wording was meant to give both Federalists and Separatists something they could live with. The complexity also gives Smith political cover. She can say she's respecting democracy and letting Albertans decide while personally campaigning for no. Okay. My concern is that, let's think like a dumb person for a second, who isn't going to research this and is just going to go and check their boxes because they go in and vote every time they get a chance. Should Alberta remain a province of Canada? Or should the government of Alberta commence the legal process under the Canadian Constitution to hold a binding provincial referendum on whether or not Alberta should separate from Canada? I see no way that this should be a yes or no question. Like, the second part is going to confuse people, and they're just going to go back and they're going to just be like, I don't understand the second part. Should Alberta remain a province of Canada? They're going to answer that in yes and no. And if they answer yes, then they'll be actually answering for the opposite. So if you get confused and you just look at the first part and you answer that, vote yes, you're actually voting for the opposite of what you want. And this is the thing you don't want to have happen in your referendum question. Okay? This is designed to get misleading information. I mean, just break it up into two different questions. I think they probably will. I think they'll get enough pushback that they'll break it up. But let's see what Premier Danielle Smith has to say.
Last week, an Alberta judge released a decision finding that the citizen initiative petition organized by the group Stay Free Alberta on the issue of Alberta separation is unconstitutional because, in the judge's view, there was not adequate consultation done with the First Nations band about the potential effect of the petition on their treaty rights. This ruling fundamentally misinterprets the nature of the duty to consult, which was never meant to prevent citizens from making their voices heard through a democratic process. Now, I want to be clear. I support Alberta remaining in Canada. That is how I would vote on separation in a provincial referendum. It is also the position of my government and my caucus. However, despite my personal support for remaining in Canada, I am deeply troubled by an erroneous court decision that interferes with the democratic rights of hundreds.
Like, I completely agree. As if you have a process that allows citizen referendum question to be put out there, um like, not a binding one. I don't, let me see. Was the original petition question going to be binding? How do I say that better? Is the original petition referendum question referendum, was the original petition referendum question going to be binding? Is that why it was shut down by the courts? Let's see what we find there. Because a binding referendum question and a non-binding referendum question are very different. One, the government has to enforce, and the other one is just essentially getting an opinion of the people on a subject, right? And I find if you have a way to put a non-binding question referendum to your people, then if they get the vote, that should happen, right? Even if there's like a legal issue, you got to figure that out. If there's enough people that support it. If there's not, then you don't even got to worry about it, right? And so the whole binding or not binding is important. And the answer is actually no. The courts did not shut it down because it was binding. Reason was different. Let me clarify both things. The original petition question binding, the original Stay Free Alberta petition, if it had gathered enough signatures and proceeded, would have triggered a binding referendum. Okay. So it is a binding referendum. So if you go through the petition process, you can get a binding referendum question. I mean, like, the question I would want, can we switch to a proportional representation model rather than this first past the post crap that we currently have to deal with? Like, that would be a good binding referendum question. Anyway, so the petition would have triggered a binding referendum, meaning a yes vote would have legally obligated the government to begin separating proceeding. That's a key difference from Smith's new October question, which is explicitly non-binding. Why did the court actually shut it down? The courts didn't rule on whether the binding referendum was legal or not. The judge objected was narrower and more procedural. The ruling found that there was inadequate consultation with First Nations. Like, in my opinion, that is only a problem because it's binding. And if it's a binding question, then you have to have subtleties worked out. Like, what happens with the First Nations tribes and stuff like that. That all has to be worked out if it's a binding question. Non-binding question. These are things you have to work out if there's enough support of people that say yeah. Right? It is yes, not no. There's no way that question survives. There's no way. The referendum was shut down because of how the process was carried out, skipping Indigenous consultation. Not what the question was asking. The bindingness of it wasn't the legal problem. In my opinion, that should be the legal problem. The lack of consultation was. That said, a binding separation referendum would almost certainly face much bigger constitutional hurdles down the road, particularly given Canada's Clarity Act, which sets federal conditions for recognizing any province's vote to separate. That battle hasn't happened yet. The court, I thought, well before that. I mean, it looks like unless they can confuse people well enough, they're going to fail. I mean, if this is beside, like, no, Alberta stays in Canada. Yes, the governments are, like, this should be beside the yes, no. If you're going to keep this question. Because if you ask anyone that question and be like, yes, no, and you just cover the what it actually says down here, I mean, like, you're going to confuse probably half the people. You're not going to get a good idea if people actually want to leave with a confusing question.
Of thousands of Albertans. Albertans who
I don't know if I'll watch this whole thing, but we'll watch the part where she at least talks about the referendum question.
volunteered, prepared petitions, made their case to fellow citizens, and appear to have secured the required amount of signatures necessary under Alberta law.
After you lowered it, like, you did make the process easier for
Law to hold a provincial referendum. The fact is that between the Forever Canada petition requesting a referendum on Alberta remaining in Canada and the Stay Free Alberta petition requesting a referendum on leaving Canada, approximately 700,000 Albertans have signed a petition.
700,000. What's the population of Alberta? I mean, that's a good number of people to get out and sign something.
Requesting a vote on this issue. And I, as Premier, will not have a legal mistake by a single judge silence the voices of hundreds of thousands of Albertans. That's not the Alberta way. Alberta's future will be decided by Albertans, not the courts. Our government will therefore be appealing the decision to Alberta's Court of Appeal and, if necessary, the Supreme Court of Canada.
I wonder how much work they put into getting the flags like that. Like, you gotta hang them up, you gotta hold them. They put a lot of work into that backdrop.
But this process will take many months and possibly years before being addressed by those higher courts. In the meantime, under our legal system, this troubling court decision is...
Maybe I need a flag in the background, meticulously curved and bent at the right angle.
Is binding law in Alberta until it is
so.
successfully appealed. This means that it is unlikely the courts will permit Elections Alberta to hold a binding provincial referendum on separation until this incorrect ruling is overturned or clarified. But there is another way to hear from Albertans while we wait for our legal appeal to be heard. That is why I'm announcing today that I will be requesting our government.
I mean, like, you don't even need to do the legal appeal if you don't get support for leaving, right? That whole legal appeal, that only needs to be done if you get like more than 50% support to leave or a yes vote. This is what people need to see before going in to vote, right? No, Alberta stays in Canada. Yes, the government starts the legal process towards a binding separation referendum. I do hope they change the
government add an additional question to the October 19th referendum vote announced previously. The additional question will be, should Alberta remain a province of Canada? Or should the government of Alberta commence the legal process required under the Canadian Constitution to hold a binding provincial referendum on whether or not Alberta should separate from Canada?
So yeah, wait, no. Yes, no, yes. This should not be a yes or no question. Yes or no should have nothing to do with this. The responses should be just this. Give me a checkbox beside this one and this one, rather than no and yes.
Because this proposed referendum question does not directly trigger separation, but if successful, would ask Alberta's government to commence the legal process necessary to hold a binding referendum on the matter, the recent court ruling would not be applicable, and the referendum question I outlined could proceed. This question will also ensure the 700,000 signatories to both the Forever Canada petition and the Stay Free Alberta petition are respected, and the will of Albertans is heard. Kicking the can down the road only prolongs a very emotional and important debate.
I completely agree with her here. Like, you get this many signatures for the Forever Canada and Stay Free Alberta. Like, you have to have the referendum. They've gone through the process. They've done your legally required collection of signatures. And now you have to have a question about it.
And muzzling the voices of hundreds of thousands of Albertans wanting to be heard is unjustifiable in a free and democratic society. It's time to have a vote. Understand the will of Alberta.
Can we put a proportional representation question on as well? Like, should we switch to a proportional representation style of government? That's the question I want.
On this subject.
That's the question I would be interested in.
And move on. Now, obviously, Alberta's first ever provincial vote on our province's future in Canada is of monumental importance. As such, I feel it is important to clearly state my personal position so Albertans know where I stand.
She doesn't move her hands at all. She's had them like tucked together in the exact same position the whole time. How do you talk like that? I have to always be moving when I talk.
I first want to assure Albertans that our government will respect the outcome and direction received on all of the referendum questions being voted on this October 19th.
So I will take a further look into these as we get closer, to break down each question and what they fully mean.
Our government has already launched the website, albertareferendum2026.ca, with a significant amount of background information on the immigration and constitutional questions previously announced, and I hope every Albertan will take the time to explore that website in detail. As to the specific issue of separation, I have repeatedly stated that the position of the UCP caucus and UCP government is to build a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. I have never deviated from that position, and I will not do so now. I will therefore be voting for Alberta to remain in Canada while continuing to work.
She doesn't say if it's a yes or a no. Does she even know? Okay, we're just going to keep watching.
Each and every day to restore and strengthen provincial rights under the Canadian Constitution. The fact is, Canada was founded on this very principle. Canada is very different from the United States and many other Western democracies. For example, the United States centralizes the majority of power and decision-making in its federal government.
What happened?
In Canada, we chose a decentralized federation composed of very unique and diverse provinces left to govern themselves in almost all matters, with the main exceptions of national defense and international affairs. Over time, our federal government has sought to move towards a more centralized American-style system, with Ottawa attempting to take over many provincial areas of jurisdiction, using all manner of legislative, judicial, and financial leverage. I categorically reject Ottawa's attempts to do so and call on all provincial leaders and MPs to undo the extensive damage that centralization of power in Ottawa has done to our country economically and with respect to national unity. I am fiercely loyal to both Alberta.
So she's saying that the federal government has been centralizing power. Which is, like Canada, the provinces tended to have more leeway and more say than they do in like a state would in the States. See, I don't know. I don't know the right way of breaking up powers between the federal government and the provincial government. But I will say, whatever Justin Trudeau did, just undo that, because that was horrible. And that had terrible effects. And if that was centralization, then that was not working. And we want to undo that.
And Canada. But I truly believe our country is so much stronger and more prosperous when we respect the rights of provinces and empower them to govern themselves with minimal federal interference. Albertans, not Ottawa. Quebecers, not Ottawa. And all the other provinces must each be empowered to control our own direction and destiny, whether it's energy policy, agricultural practices, policing, firearms ownership, or how to administer our social programs. The days of Ottawa dictating and interfering in provincial affairs must come to an end. The future economic success and unity of our country depends on it. When I was first elected Premier, I was very concerned that it would be almost impossible to restore provincial rights stolen from Alberta and other provinces by the Trudeau-Singh government in Ottawa. However, our government went to work anyway to see if we could. We have been relentless in making our voices heard.
Are we sure it's not AI? Like, those hands have not moved. Like, not at all. Like, I think that's actually hard to talk. I guess I keep interrupted, but like, she's 6 minutes in now, and like, no movement at all. This is
launching
weird.
dozens of legal actions, appearing in hundreds of national interviews, bridge building with other premiers, and aggressively passing legislation, such as the Alberta Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act, to take back our provincial autonomy from the federal government. We ran extensive advertising campaigns against the destructive net zero electricity regulations as
Net zero is one of those things that just lost massively. Like, I personally think that, like, I'm not against all environmental policy, but you protect the environment through investment, not through restriction. You make clean energy cheaper. That is how you protect the environment. Trying to enforce a net zero. They did this in England, and you know what they did? They took the most carbon intensive parts of their process and they just moved it overseas. So that their country, yeah, look, we don't produce any carbon. Yeah. The part of our production now happens in China, where they have no restrictions. And they're not incentivized to try and reduce carbon at all. And so that part is actually dirtier and more carbon intensive than ever. But like, look at our country, you know, not here. I personally think the best thing to do is, one, if you push the net zero, you're just gonna push certain parts of the process out of your country. You need to keep that in your country, and you need to invest into making it cleaner. That is how you fix it. Because once you put the work in to actually making steel and having the process of making steel use less or produce less carbon, then that is something that can be copied elsewhere. And that is how you reduce emissions globally, rather than just, oh yeah, we'll just produce steel in another country that doesn't have any restrictions on net zero or carbon. Like, the net zero stuff, I see where it comes from. It's destructive. It's going to cause issues. It's going to weaken your economy, and it is going to produce more carbon, just in another country and not yours.
as well as the catastrophic oil and gas production cap, in order to persuade our fellow Canadians that Trudeau's anti-Alberta agenda was also anti-Canadian and was destroying the unity, energy, and economic future of our nation. A great majority of Albertans joined us in that fight, calling friends, relatives, and participating in social media to spread that message throughout the country. We made a lot of noise as a province. We fought hard and refused to accept the status quo. And the result? Well, my friends, we have started to win. Over the course of the last 2 years, the tide of national public opinion on resource development, provincial rights, energy policy, and a host of other issues began to turn.
So we're seeing this in many Western nations, like not just Canada. So there's a new pipeline, oil and gas production caps gone, consumer carbon tax gone, Alberta net zero power regulations gone, EV mandate gone, export tax threats gone, tanker ban adjusted, greenwashing provisions gone. I think a lot of countries are coming to realize that the net zero stuff was doing far more harm than good. Like not only was it hurting their own economies, it was just outsourcing the carbon intensive aspect as well, which is not good in the long term. And so we saw this exact thing, like the net zero, removing the net zero was one of the big things of reform in England and massive gains. Trump, obviously, drill baby drill. Pretty clear where he stands on all this. I do think that like clean energy is the future. And I think we get there through investment into clean energy, not restricting dirty energy. That's how you get there.
Our Alberta oil sands went from a national target to a national treasure. Pipelines went from...
I mean, it always should have been a national. I mean, our uranium deposits are also a national. I think nuclear is probably going to be the next big source of energy. And you see development into that right now. And I think we've got like the largest uranium deposits in the world. Let me double check that. Where does Canada rank for uranium deposits? I think Russia's up there too, but size-wise, that makes... So, Australia. Percentage of global known resources. Australia, Kazakhstan, and Canada, Russia, Namibia. Australia is actually the biggest one. I mean, 10% will always be able to meet our needs. While Australia has the most uranium in the ground, they do not utilize or mine the majority of it. Because of this, Canada jumps to the second largest producer and exporter of uranium in the world, accounting for roughly 24% of global production. Pakistan leading the pack by a wide margin at 39%. Okay.
Possible to a national imperative. Justin Trudeau's anti-Alberta, anti-energy policies became a national embarrassment, one of several that ultimately cost...
I mean, like he was so bad for the country. Like you see Trudeau get in, and then all the charts start going the wrong way. They all start going the wrong way, and then COVID happened, and people were generally more accepting of government overreach during COVID, and so we got another term. And they continued to all go the wrong way. So now we got 8 years of a hole to dig ourselves out of rather than 4.
His prime ministership. The Leave It in the Ground NDP, led by Jagmeet Singh, was electorally annihilated. And the federal Liberals, led by their new leader, Prime Minister Mark Carney, adopted most of Alberta's positions on energy and resource development.
I mean, that's what I'm That's what I say. Like, there's so much. A lot of the Alberta Believe stuff is because of Trudeau and his positions. The current government in Ottawa actually, we saw it. Where's her little church? Like, far taken most of Alberta's positions on energy.
In fact, the current Prime Minister has worked very constructively with our government to craft an Alberta-Ottawa Energy Agreement, or MOU, as it is often called. This has already attracted tens of billions of dollars in investment for new pipelines.
Yeah, like we also got a pipeline, another one going down to the U.S. That was in the sign-off process in Ottawa. I mean, Washington. Like, as much as clean energy is the future, dirty energy is the present. And as much as we'd like to live in the future, we do have to live in the present.
Natural gas run data centers.
Like, this oil shock that we're seeing, North America has, like, the US is the biggest oil producer in the world. Canada is one of the largest oil producers in the world. We're going to be fine. But you're going to see a lot of countries really struggle because of the oil shock that's happening. And I think it'll get pretty bad. Like, Cuba levels bad.
Electricity generation, and so much more. Under that energy agreement with Ottawa, the destructive federal electricity regulations are gone. The economically disastrous oil and gas production cap has been scrapped. New pipelines carrying nearly 1 million barrels of Alberta oil to the United States are proceeding with speed toward construction. And a new 1 million barrel a day pipeline to the BC West Coast is well in progress and on track to have its permitting completed by September of next year. Could and should these reforms and projects move faster? Yes, of course they should. The federal government can and needs to act with even more urgency than it has. Do we in Alberta still have our differences with the federal Liberal government? Obviously. And make no mistake, we will relentlessly challenge them to respect our provincial rights and jurisdiction every time they step over the line. But my fellow Albertans, there can be no doubt that things are a world of difference better for our province than they were under the Trudeau NDP government. Both major federal parties, the federal Conservatives and now the federal Liberals, representing 85% of voters in Canada, are advocating for Alberta to increase our energy production and exports. Only some extremists in the NDP, Bloc Québécois, and Green parties, representing less than...
we have, like, the third largest known reserves of oil. We should be increasing production. Where is it? Like, number one was Venezuela. I mean, it was a collapse. Trump went in there, he abducted the leader, and maybe they're back on track. I don't know. But where? Yeah, the second, wasn't the second one Russia? Largest oil producing countries. I should have probably said largest oil reserve countries. So, US, Russia, but, like, they're in a war. And I think Ukraine is getting better and better at targeting Russian oil infrastructure. I think they're the second largest reserves. They're in an active war. Which means when we... Okay, let me make sure of that. What countries have the largest known oil reserves? Venezuela's first. Venezuela. Okay, so it's not Russia. So Venezuela's first. We're actually fourth. reserves, billions, global share. I guess this keeps changing, right? They find. So Venezuela is first. Lap state, maybe recovering now. Nice if Venezuela recovered. Saudi Arabia, so that's a pretty stable country. It's close to Iran and the conflict, and most of their oil did pass through the Strait of Hormuz. I imagine they'll build pipelines. They've already got one across their country, and they'll expand that so that they're not at the mercy of that strait anymore. But like interrupted oil supply. Iran, currently at war with the U.S. I don't think I got to go too far into that. Canada, like fourth largest reserves, like a stable country. You know, nothing's gonna interrupt this flow of oil. Like there's protests that stop pipelines, but that's about it. But the government seems to be more committed to our oil infrastructure nowadays. Iraq, that all goes through the Strait of Hormuz, and they don't have any other option. UAE, their pipeline, because they had a big pipeline that avoided the Strait of Hormuz. It got hit, it got bombed. Yeah, Iran targeted it. I don't think it knocked it offline, but it was like a threatening that we could knock this offline. And that's how they were getting oil out. Why? Like, that part of the world is so oil rich. Kuwait is another one that goes through the Strait of Hormuz almost, no, entirely. That one's a little locked up at the top of the strait. And then you get into Russia and the US, which are having war, and then obviously another stable. Nothing's going to affect the supply there. Libya. Okay. I've stopped this too many times. Let's try and get to
Than
the end.
15% of voters in Canada hold fast to their anti-Alberta, leave it in the ground rhetoric. This complete turning of Canadian government policy and national public opinion was unthinkable just a few short years ago. No one thought it was possible, except here in Alberta. We turned the tide. We are winning hearts and minds to our cause right across the...
Well, I mean, like, the tide shifted in every country. It shifted most heavily in the US. And then it shifted, I think it was the start of the Ukraine-Russian war, when energy at the first, like, in my opinion, Russia was the first one to use access to oil as a weapon on the geopolitical scene. They tried to starve Eastern Europe of energy. And largely, Eastern Europe has now moved away from Russian oil. But like, they've moved towards oil that comes from the Strait of Hormuz, which apparently is also not safe. That's another story. So it was shown that oil could be used as a weapon, and all of a sudden, your energy security became so much more important. And we saw the shift in the US, and the shift was slightly delayed, but we see the shift happening in Canada. A necessity of making sure you control your supply of energy. Because, like, if you want to see what happens when you don't control your supply of energy, just look up anything about Cuba right now. That's what happened. It's like total collapse.
The country, as many of our fellow Canadians are coming to understand that a strong Alberta and strong provinces means a stronger and more prosperous Canada. Now, to those hundreds of thousands of Albertans who are still not convinced or are unsatisfied with the pace of change and believe that separation is the answer, I want you to know that I empathize with you and I understand why you feel that way. You are justifiably frustrated and angry with Ottawa. You are proud and loyal Albertans that have watched our province be taken advantage of repeatedly over past decades, and you want it to stop. So do I, more than anything. Like you, I love this province and our people so much. I am so proud to be Albertan. But I ask you to please consider joining me to vote for Alberta to remain in Canada and not...
Still no word on yes or no from her.
Give up on our beautiful country just as we're gaining respect and the tide has turned in our favor. Not when our fellow Canadians, even those that may support different political parties, are nonetheless supporting Alberta's vision for a prosperous, energy-rich nation with strong provinces building a Canada we can be proud of again. In my view, now is not the time to give up hope in our country, not when we have fought so hard for so long and come so far. I believe Canada can still work. I believe it's working better every day, and it can work even better in the future if we keep fighting together for it. Together with our fellow Canadians, we have built a Canada that is loved and respected all over the world. Our men and women have died together fighting for our freedoms and the safety of hundreds of millions around the globe. Canadians were there in Europe, fighting and making the ultimate sacrifice in the Second World War long before we were joined in that effort by our American allies. Together with our allies, we were also instrumental in beating back the forces of communism and terrorism. The world would be a much darker place if not for Canada. We have built marvels of technology together. We are known the world over as a country of innovators.
I mean, right now, they're looking at like modular nuclear creation, like modular nuclear reactors in Canada. It's one of the things that they're debating on putting money into, and it looks like that may be the future of energy. Like if it not the current iteration, that technology could be the future. And I'm looking forward to it. Like that sounds
explorers
awesome.
And entrepreneurs, but also of peacemakers.
Because like clean energy, that would be the easiest bar to hit. The problem with clean energy is that the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. And our ability to store energy is not great. Batteries still suck at storing large amounts of energy. They've gotten a lot better, and if there's a breakthrough in battery technology, maybe that'll be the solution. But right now you need consistent generation, and nuclear just seems like the best choice.
Philanthropists and contributors to the good of the world. Our federal politicians may stray from our foundational values from time to time, but our fellow Canadians, they are our family, our friends, our blood. We all know our family needs to do some work to get rid of a few bad habits developed over the past decade, but that's what we are in the process of fixing. Now is the time to double down and fight even harder for the prosperity and change we want to see in our country. Because Albertans are at our best when we are hard at work getting things done for each other and our families, solving problems, serving our communities, creating and innovating, building a stronger Alberta and a stronger Canada. And now is our chance to do so, finally with a Chinook wind at our backs instead of a winter blizzard in our face. Finally, I wish to speak with those of you who already agree with me that Alberta should remain in Canada.
Okay.
Let us guard against the trap of using division and demonization tactics against our fellow Albertans with whom we disagree on this matter. The vast majority of those advocating for separation love our province profoundly. Many are also proud Canadians that have simply lost hope that their families can flourish within Canada. So instead of attacking these loyal Albertans, let's work together to restore hope in their country again. Let's work together to hold Ottawa accountable for implementing the Alberta-Ottawa energy deal and get that pipeline built to the West Coast.
Yes.
Let's work together to get Ottawa to stand down on their unfair persecution of law-abiding gun owners. Let's work together to build an immigration system that helps support our economy while putting Alberta workers and taxpayers first. Let's demonstrate why Alberta can be stronger and more prosperous as a member of a renewed and unified Canada, one that is moving past the last 10 years, to empower provinces to develop and export our resources, and to govern our own provincial affairs free from federal interference. Let's use the power of hope and persuasion and reject the language of division and demonization. We are, after all, each other's neighbors, friends, and family. We must never let the voices of hatred and vilification divide us as a people. Because at the end of this debate, and when the referendum is over, we must come together to ensure that our beloved province continues to prosper. And that is my hope, that our beloved Alberta and Canada will remain forever strong and free. Thank you and good night.
Okay, so that was her speech on it. It was good. My personal opinion on this is, if you have a citizen-led petition like this, like, I don't think a citizen-led petition should lead to a binding referendum, but I think you should, like, if you have a citizen-led petition and it meets the legal requirements, you should be able to get a non-binding referendum. And that's essentially what they're doing now. It's confusing. The question is confusing. I would like that question to not be confusing. The whole time she didn't even say if she was going to vote yes or no, because, like, probably knows she's going to have to change the question, because it's almost intentionally designed to make it look like more people want to leave than they do, with just how they've worded the question. Like, nothing in the question indicates that a yes is for this and a no is for that. You would need almost to put that beside the yes and the no. Like like Claude did for me. Or it's no, Alberta stays in Canada. Yes, the government starts the legal process. Because this question is just terrible. Terrible. Like, you're going to get people that are going to get confused and be like, okay, I don't understand it. Should Alberta remain province of Canada? I agree. You vote yes. The government starts the legal process towards building a binding separation. You literally, like, if you get confused, the answer is the opposite of what you'd want, which doesn't make any sense. Now, that could be intentional. Like, did a separatist write this question for you? Or maybe they want it to look like there's more support than there is. I don't know. Anyway, question I don't like, but I like. But I would like to have an actual good question in reference. Putting the question to the people, I think, is always the better thing to do. Like, get an actual confirmation on where people stand on a subject. I think that's just better.